Local elections matter. They significantly impact this community we share. Information on candidates can be hard to find and is oftentimes reduced to short sound bites without context. This is why the Avalon Foundation has teamed up with the Talbot Spy to bring you a series of interviews with all of the candidates for Talbot County Council. This is our opportunity to provide you a complete and unbiased profile of the candidates and their platforms. These interviews will air daily on MCTV at 8 a.m. and again at 2:30 p.m. and will be available online at youtube.com/Midshore Community Television, where you'll be able to explore their answers at your own pace and on your own time. Work like this is supported by viewers like you. Please visit avalonfoundation.org to find out how you can help.
Pete, thanks for being here.
Delighted.
Yeah, I think you're the first one to start this series, and I'm grateful that you found the time to do it. I think that just to cut to the chase a little bit, I think it would be helpful if we understood a little bit more about your background.
Yeah.
You did not graduate in municipality or county management.
So I've been on the Easton Town Council now for 9 years, meaning that I'm now in my third term, and that's been a great experience. It's been we've had a very collegial council. We've got a lot done. That doesn't mean we agree on everything. What it means is that when we disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable about it.
Right.
And of course, town council, like the county council, is not my principal occupation. I'm chief curator for the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. I've been doing that since I got out of graduate school, and that was 27 years ago. And actually, I worked for a few summers at the museum even prior to that. So I've been around Talbot County for quite a long time. I've got deep roots here. I love this place. I'm married here. I've got two children in the Talbot County Public Schools. My daughter just started her freshman year at Easton High School, and I've got a son in the elementary. So public education is important to me. But I'm a part of this community. I live within walking distance of downtown Easton, and commute to a job in St. Michael's. So I'm in this community.
You know, there's a big difference though between caring about a community and actually going through the process of an election. I mean, this is a totally different degree of involvement. And I always am curious about, you know, do you have a 3 o'clock in the morning experience, or is this kind of slowly kind of nipping at you as something that you feel like you want to do? How does it work with you?
I first got involved in public service close to 20 years ago when Andy Hollis, who is now the county manager, he was then the manager for the town of St. Michael's, talked me into serving on the Historic District Commission. And I said, you know, this would be a good match for my interests and education as a historian. But also he helped, I think, going all the way back to my junior high years. I had a teacher who was a member of the Republican Central Committee and was politically active, and we always had these political discussions in class, and she was a real inspiration for me. So I probably always had that bug. So when Andy approached me and said, why don't you step up and do this, I suppose, you know, not knowing anything about this, I was maybe a little hesitant at first, but it's been a great experience. I really love helping people get to a solution. There are times that we need to say no, but I'm always looking for, well, if we change this and that, I think we can get to a yes. Mm-hmm. Let's look for that solution. Some people think that I'm perhaps too easy to compromise, but in today's political climate, I think we could use a little bit more of that.
So, going back to it though, was, when you decided to go for the county position, I mean, did you have a particular issue? Was there like some kind of moment of clarity where you said, I'm opposed to that position, or I'm opposed to that approach, and therefore I'm going to throw my hat in the ring?
Well, what motivated me to get into the town council 9 years ago is really very similar to what motivated me to throw my hat in the ring for county council, and that has to do with land use planning issues. If you roll back the calendar a dozen years or so, we'd seen a high pace of annexation to the town, sprawl development going up around the borders of town, a pace that I think can be really dislocating. And I thought that we need to grow inward. We've got lots of infill opportunities to develop. We've got lots of redevelopment opportunities. And I wanted to change the conversation about how Easton develops. And now I'm looking to do the same thing with land use planning issues in the county, where we have a really special place here in Talbot County that is distinct and different from surrounding counties and certainly other parts of Maryland. It's this rural character that I think we've quite jealously guarded for a long time. The predominant agricultural land use, the defined edges of towns, and the really very picturesque rural landscapes that attract people to live here, that attract people to tour here, to visit here. It's a precious resource, and we need to guard that precious resource carefully. And so I'm looking to change the conversation in the county about those matters.
Well, and it's probably a good segue into this very specific issue that came up recently with town council plans for sewer expansion, and the kind of approaches to the Bay 100 area.
Right.
And I just would like to get a better understanding of what your point of view is on that.
Yeah. This started back with the adoption of the county's comprehensive plan, going back 3+ years now, in how we define the character, how we protect the character of our rural villages, places like Sherwood, places like Royal Oak, and how should they develop? In other words, when we add housing units, when we add businesses, anything to these, what is appropriate there? What is the density that's appropriate there? How are we going to have the infrastructure to support that development in those places? And my inclination is to make sure that we channel most of our development into the municipalities, into the places where we truly have that infrastructure to support them. The transportation infrastructure, the water and sewer infrastructure, all these pieces, so that ultimately when we add houses to these areas, that they don't become a financial burden to the county in providing services, in providing police protection, and providing all those things. We can do that a whole lot more efficiently when that development takes place in the places that already have the infrastructure to support them.
So in this recent go-round, it's all a matter of balance, is it not? You have these competing forces of workforce housing, for example, affordable housing, and that some people believe that the Bay 100 is deserving of the same kind of investment as other parts of the county, versus those who have bought their houses as a second home. Maybe they're now living in them full time and bought into a certain quality of life.
Well, with affordable workforce housing, again, yes, we need to provide those opportunities. Yes, I agree, there is not enough of that available now, and this is true for both owner-occupied housing as well as for rental housing. This is something that needs more attention in our county. Yeah. The opportunities to do that most affordably are in those places where the infrastructure exists, in those municipalities. And so we can provide those opportunities best and most affordably for the long term if we follow good development guidelines. And really that's what the comprehensive plan and the code should be all about. The amendment to the code that passed recently, having to do with when we extend sewer to these rural villages, to these peninsulas in the Bay Hundred, let's make sure that we're doing it, and that for the environmental reason of cleaning up septics and the impact that that's going to have on the neighboring waterways, and that we don't reverse the progress or undermine the progress by opening these fields up for new development. We can lose all the progress that we're making with those hookups.
So what would have been your solution if you were at the table while this was being?
Well, I was a big advocate for that amendment to not allow sewers to change the character of a place and open it up for development. And I was grateful that that particular amendment passed. I think it was a bit of a struggle to convince the council majority that this was the right way to go, and that this was the will of the county to develop in this way.
Yeah. So what's unmistakably clear is that this county is going to grow.
Absolutely.
And so, the question is how, and how do you position Talbot County, which now has become, I believe, a retail regional shopping area. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of potential in terms of our relationship to DC and Baltimore, etc. But how do you kind of put all this together into kind of a broader perspective? How do you want to control growth, or how do you want to? You said you want to kind of push a lot of this residential into existing communities,
right.
But I think that how does that apply to economic development?
We have a big job to do with economic development, and both with business retention as well as business attraction here. But it's not just traditional economic development. Right now, if you look at the town of Easton, we do have pretty reasonable balance in that the number of jobs in Easton is not too far off from the number of working age adults that we have here. And that doesn't mean that everybody who lives here works here, it just means that we have roughly an equal number commuting in and commuting out. We're not a bedroom community. And that Easton is such a big part of the population of the county as a whole that helps define the prosperity of the whole county. And similarly in St. Michael's, there's a pretty good job base there as well. We've got more that we need to do, though, in terms of prosperity for this county. I'm fortunate to live in Easton and have access to good broadband internet. But there are parts of this county that are completely dark in that regard. And if there were a business case to get that so-called last mile, mm-hmm. it would already be happening. Mm-hmm. And a couple of places where we have the density, like Kingston Landing, it is, in fact, already happening. But there are some parts of the county where that really can never happen. And so we need to be proactive. Frankly, it becomes more difficult to sell a house in parts of this county where you don't have that. Mm-hmm. And this is infrastructure that we do need to send around. We send kids home from schools with laptops, but if they can't get broadband internet at home, how much are we really helping them make that technology jump, learn to be productive participants in a 21st century economy? We need to provide that infrastructure, and frankly, there's a legitimate government role in making sure that happens.
Before we move on to education, is there any other kind of what I would call low-hanging fruit in terms of economic development that you feel like the county should take advantage of now rather than later?
There's a whole lot more that I have to learn about economic development, and fortunately, we have some good advisors in the county. I am very fond, actually, of what we've done. I'm very proud of what we've done in the town of Easton with economic development, in that we used to do this as on a staff-driven model. And when we had some frustrations over that, we ended up moving it to a different model, putting the decision-making in the hands of the business community, who also have an interest in the success of economic development. So we created this Economic Development Corporation. We empowered the Easton Business Alliance to do the decision-making, carry on Easton's Main Street program, but with the decision-making in the hands of the business owners.
I see. Yeah.
There is nothing inherently wrong with the way the county's going about this. In fact, I think the county's got right now some pretty good things going on in its economic development office, and I think they've got a very good team there. We have to make sure that they are doing everything they can to coordinate with, to keep the communications open with the business community here. I've got a great relationship with some of that staff, and I've been very impressed with some of the programs that we've got going there.
You know, I know that there's a thing called the school board that
Yes.
handles a good bit of the administration of the school district we have here in Talbot County. But every year, they have to go to the Talbot County Council for board approval. Budget approval.
Right.
And we live in a state that mandates what they would call maintenance of effort, in terms of the budgeting for those local schools. And in many cases, these counties are finding themselves unable to, in some cases, meet the maintenance effort, but to actually supplement the school system to ensure the quality of education that will be meaningful to their students. Right. So, you know, those are big issues now. I know that this affected Talbot County this year, but even more so in Kent County. And one county decided to invest in their schools, and the others, you know, were conservative with their budget. You know, how do you fall on that issue?
I testified before the county council this past year for full funding of the school budget. It was not a significant increase that the schools were asking for. What they told us, what they told the public, that the board planned to do with that increase in funding, were all, I thought really basics. Talbot County schools are struggling with a public perception that their results are somewhat middling. And if you look at class sizes, if you look at resources that we put toward this, compared with other schools in Maryland, you know, we're stacked up against some pretty tough competition in Maryland. If we were being compared to schools in maybe some other state, we'd stack up pretty well. The funding disparities in Maryland counties are not as bad as they are in some other states. Maryland's got a formula, and we love in Talbot County to rail against that formula because it disadvantages Talbot County because we have a larger tax base. I think that we've got to stop complaining about that, and we've got to start taking some action and just making sure that we can improve, take the steps that we need to do to improve the public perception of the schools. We've actually got some pretty dynamite faculty. We've actually got some pretty solid programs. We've actually got some pretty good things going on in terms of vocational education. I wish we could do more on that front. And programs that meet the needs of students who are not necessarily college bound. We need to help the schools get over the top with those things. And I believe that a lot of this can be done with incremental increases. We're not talking about a dislocating increase in school budgets. Frankly, we don't have room within the county finances to do that. But we can take some important steps in the right direction there.
I have two other things. I just want to make sure we're on time here. Talbot County's diversity is changing significantly.
Mm-hmm.
I think 30% of all kids in public schools now are from minority or
Mm-hmm.
ethnic groups. And so it's like kind of a new paradigm shift for our county. And, it all starts with leadership at the top of how a community handles diversity.
Mm-hmm.
You have some strongly held views. I know this has come up on the Easton Council as well.
Absolutely. Well,
this is the year of Frederick Douglass, and 200 years. Are we where we're supposed to be?
We can answer this. We can answer this several different ways. Yes, the face of Talbot County is changing. We are where 20 years ago the Hispanic population was virtually non-existent. Was a very, very tiny percentage. Today, it's grown exponentially, and that is a very young population. We're now at something like 20% of the school census is Hispanic, and that's skewed very strongly toward the elementary grades. These are young families with younger children, and we need to be providing services for them. They're a vital part of our economy here. They're a vital part of our community. We need to make sure that they are part of our community, and that that they're not forced to be a separate community.
Mm-hmm.
That we do the job of integrating them into the Talbot County community. My children are third generation immigrants, or descendants of an immigrant. My wife's mother immigrated from Argentina. She had learned to speak English already before she immigrated, but she always spoke with an accent. My wife is a native speaker of Spanish. She speaks English without an accent. My children don't speak Spanish. This is the typical pattern among immigrants.
Yeah.
You can't get the third generation to keep those roots,
Yeah.
those immigrant roots. They do immigrate. Sometimes we're frustrated by the time that it takes for this to happen, but we can make it happen better and more smoothly if we reach out and provide the services that these folks need to help them integrate into the community.
And in terms of just this whole topic of reconciliation with the African American community in Talbot County, we went through a very, very difficult thing about the Talbot Boys statue several years ago. This issue is not going away from what I can see from the national news. But more, kind of locally, we are celebrating the bicentennial of Frederick Douglass.
Right.
It's the appropriate time to talk about where we are in his hometown or his home county. And what are your thoughts?
It is gratifying to see the progress that this county has made in embracing the rich African American heritage that is here. Frederick Douglass and the 200th anniversary of his birth being the exemplar of that recognition in the community. That said, clearly racism is not dead in Talbot County, and we have a symbol of that on the courthouse lawn. We recognize that was not built. That was not erected right after the Civil War. It was erected at the height of Jim Crow America in the early 20th century, when racism was at its perhaps at its peak in this county, and that the move to erect a monument to the Confederate veterans and to pointedly reject inclusion of the Union veterans was very much a sign of the age in which that was done. It tells us a lot, not about so much about the Civil War, but about the era in which it was erected. And as a historian, I recognize that, and I recognize the need now not to let us all take our varied interpretations of this as we walk by, but to provide a little bit of that filter, to provide a bit of that interpretation, to help people understand where this came from and what it meant at the time it was erected, and perhaps its changed meaning today, because I don't think it means what it did when it was put up. You know, as I said, racism is not dead in this county. That's a very visible sign or symbol of that racism. Changing it or taking away is not going to change or take away that racism, but it can help inspire the conversation that will move us forward in this county.
Wrapping up, I'm just trying to give you some time. We've covered a couple subjects. You can't cover them all.
Yeah.
But this is a chance for you to kind of talk to our readers and to the general community about what your priorities are.
We've really covered my principal priorities in land use development, in education and the public schools, and if there's an important one I would add to that, it is clean water. And Talbot County is doing some important things in the way of cleaning up local waters, with the extension of sewers, with the ditch program to slow down stormwater runoff. We've done a whole lot along these lines in the town of Easton with our tree planting program, with our stream retrofits, with our urban stormwater programs, with our storm drain and street sweeping programs, and on and on. We are taking important steps to cleaning up local waters. The county is too. We need to redouble those efforts. I'm very grateful that Talbot County, for one, has not signed on to the misnamed Clean Chesapeake Coalition, which is all about changing the conversation, focusing on problems coming out of Pennsylvania. And those are problems, but cleaning up the Susquehanna River will do nothing to clean up the Tread Avenue, will do nothing to clean up the Wye or the Upper Miles River or the Upper Choptank River. The quality of those waters is dependent on what we do on our lands here in this county and of course, in our neighboring counties. We have to take responsibility for that. We have to take those measures for that dream that all Americans are entitled to: clean, fishable, swimmable waters.
Pete Lesher, thanks a lot.
Thank you.